Week 12 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 36 running backs I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. So what a season it's been for CMC. And I've said this whole season long, when healthy, he's arguably the best running back in fantasy football. And this season it's close with him and Jonathan Taylor. So this week in a matchup versus former team, I think he goes out there and has a big game. Number 2, Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. Even this week in a tough matchup at the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the better defenses in the league, I don't think it's a problem. Jonathan Taylor, all season long, he's going out there having monster performances and coming off a 220-yard rushing game versus Atlanta in a bye week last week. I think he goes out there refreshed, even in a tough matchup. Once again, is Taylor, and delivers. Number 3, Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. So last week he got bottled up running the football, but catching the football was a career game for Jahmyr Gibbs, over 100 yards receiving. He's a big-time running back once again this season in fantasy football, and he could do it all, Jahmyr Gibbs. So this week back home where Detroit's offense is better and a great matchup versus a bad Giant defense, he's a top 3 option for Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens. So Derrick Henry, a good matchup with the Jets coming in. Obviously, this New York Jet defense isn't any good, trading away Quentin Williams, trading away Sauce Gardner, Michael Carter. And the last couple weeks since Lamar's been back in the lineup, Henry's back to putting up those elite numbers. So last week, again, over 100 yards, found the end zone. I think we could see similar output in this one. Number 5, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. So this offense is going to change up a little bit, even though Bijan last season with Kirk Cousins still went out there and had a big year. And this week in a good matchup on the fast track in New Orleans, I think Bijan, even if the formation's a little bit different and the play calling will be fine in this ball game, because he's just a top-level talent. Number 6, Saquon Barkley of the Philadelphia Eagles. So this week, a good matchup at the Cowboys. I know they got a lot of reinforcements. Quentin Williams, they traded for Logan Wilson, overshown Malik Hooker back in the lineup, but I don't think it matters. Saquon Barkley, majority of his career going back to his Giant days playing in this division, has had some big games at the Cowboys. And this Cowboy team, I know last week went out there, had a good game, but that was the Vegas Raiders. And I think this week they'll struggle with Barkley and the Eagles offense. Number 7, Rico Dowdle of the Carolina Panthers. So one of the best running backs in all pro football and fantasy football this season is Dowdle. Overtaking Chuba Hubbard is the starting running back going back a few weeks ago. And he's taken off ever since. So this week in a matchup at San Francisco where Bosa and Warner out for the season, I think some decent running lanes will be open for him in this one. Number 8, James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. So James Cook, last week it was good to see him do work in the receiving game, and this week I know it's a tough matchup at the Houston Texans, one of the better defenses in the league. But Cook last week, like I said, he showed he could do some work in the receiving game, caught a 25-yard touchdown in that one as well. And this week at Houston, Thursday night, usually high-scoring games. He is a little lower than usual, but I still think he goes out there and is a solid performance. Number 9, Kyren Williams, Los Angeles Rams. So Kyren Williams, he's been a steady running back in this McVay system over the last 3 seasons. And this week, a good matchup versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a defense that can't stop anyone. We saw James Cook last week go out there, have a big game, and saw the Bills put up 44 points. So I think Kyren, once again, he'll get anywhere from his 14-20 fantasy point range. Number 10, Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. So with Jamar Chase most likely out in this one, even though he's trying to appeal the suspension, Chase Brown's going to get his work in this game. We know he's a good receiver out of the backfield. And the last month of the season, since Flacco's been traded here to Cincinnati, this offense is putting up numbers like they did with Joe Burrow last season. Obviously not as great, but still they're putting up numbers. They're making plays. And this week versus New England, I think they'll rely heavily on Brown in this one. Number 11, Trevion Henderson staying in the same game of the New England Patriots. So this week, a slam dunk matchup at the Cincinnati Bengals, one of the worst, if not the worst, defense in all pro football. And we saw Kenneth Gainwell last week go out there, find the end zone twice versus defense. And even if Ramondre Stevenson does return to the lineup, I think it's too tough to turn away from Trevion Henderson for this New England Patriot team. And this week, I think he has a good game once again with 5 touchdowns in the last 2 games. Number 12, Javonte Williams of the Dallas Cowboys. So Javonte, he's the workhorse in the backfield for Dallas. Week 11, most touches of the season. And this week, I know it's a tough matchup versus the Eagles. I know going back to week 1, he did have a big game, but that was obviously 3 months ago. We had 2 touchdowns in that one. But this offensive line, one of the better lines in the league. And I think Dallas, if they want to keep that high-powered offensive Philly off the field, even though they've struggled the last few weeks offensively, they're going to run the football a lot. 13, Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So he's going to practice this week as Bucky Irvin. I know Sean Tucker went out there last week, had a 3-touchdown game, but Bucky Irvin, better overall back, do everything out of the backfield we saw last season in his rookie year. I know he's dealing with a shoulder ankle injury, but they gave him a lot of time as this Tampa Bay Buc team. And this week, I think indoors on the fast track where you don't have to deal with outside elements is good to get him back in the lineup. 14, Emmanuel Wilson of the Green Bay Packers. So obviously a hot waiver wire pickup this week, Emmanuel Wilson. Last week, he took all the touches once Jacobs went down with injury. And I'm just guessing that Jacobs isn't going to play. It's not structural damage, which is a good thing, but that knee is definitely banged up and a lot of swelling for the knee for Josh Jacobs. And that turf in MetLife Stadium has been a problem for many seasons where we've seen a lot of knee injuries over there. So Jacobs left the game, walked off under his own power, but obviously didn't return last week. So this week, Wilson's going to be the guy, it looks like. And I think they'll give him 1 week at least off his Jacobs. And it's a decent matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings where their run defense hasn't been all that great. And we saw last week Swift and Monangai have decent ball games. 15, DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. So last week wasn't a great game for Swift, but he's still the bell cow in this backfield. Monangai, he's going to get his 5-8 touches per game and some goal line at times. But DeAndre Swift, he's been a good back all season long. We know Ben Johnson likes to utilize running backs in different formations in different ways. We saw many seasons with the Lions as the offensive coordinator with Gibbs and Montgomery. And this week versus the Steelers, even though they're one of the better Ds in the league, I still think Swift could go out there and have a good game. 16, Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Warren last week, he left the game, but he said he could have came back if they needed him to. And right now to start the week, Mike Tomlin said it's going to be limited to start with Warren. But it looks like he's going to play, and even if he's not 100%, is Warren. He's still a solid running back all season long, and this is a pretty good matchup at the Bears. And also, if it's going to be windy where it usually is this time of year in Soldier Field, they're going to run the football a lot, especially as well if Rodgers does not play in this game. 17, Ashton Jeanty of the Las Vegas Raiders. So last week, Dallas Cowboys run defense shut them down, and also the game plan just didn't make much sense to me in that ball game for the Raiders. It was a close game in the first quarter, but they abandoned the run right out of the gate. To only give Jeanty 6 carries is obviously not a smart idea. So last week he did catch the football 5 times where he salvaged a little bit. That way was Jeanty versus the Cowboys. But this week versus Cleveland, I think ground and pound, they're going to go to a little more in this game. And also, we know Cleveland's not going to put up the points like Dallas did, where this will be a tight, contested ball game. 18, Breece Hall of the New York Jets. So Breece Hall, it's been an up-and-down season, free agent after the year. This week, a tough matchup in Baltimore. And, you know, teams are going to load the box, and especially I think Baltimore will, even though I think Baltimore gets off to a good start. And the Jets got to catch up and throw the football a whole lot with Tyrod Taylor in there, where Hall this season hasn't been much of a receiver. But also as well, I think that's on Justin Fields, why Hall hasn't been part of the receiving game, where he's been one of the better PPR running backs over the last couple of years. 19, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Etienne this season, it's been a solid year for him. I know Bashal Tutin got a lot of touches last week as well, where it was almost a 50-50 split. But the thing is, Tutin, he hurt the ankle, and to me, it's not looking good that he's going to play in this week's game, especially if it's a high ankle sprain. And this week, it's a great matchup on the fast track in Arizona, especially if Etienne's going to get a full workload. 20, Woody Marks of the Houston Texans. So Marks, he's the guy over there in the backfield for Houston. Nick Chubb hasn't done much pretty much all season long, and his touches the last 2 weeks have gone way down. So Marks, I know last week didn't have a great game, but this is a good matchup versus the Buffalo Bills, one of the worst run defenses in the league. And we saw last week Sean Tucker with 3 touchdowns, and he had a field day in that one. 21, Quinshon Judkins of the Cleveland Browns. So this week on paper, it does look like a good matchup. We saw Javonte Williams rush for 92 yards in last week's game versus Raider defense. But Judkins, the last 3 out of 4 games, he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points. So this week in Vegas, yes, he could have a good game, but I think in this one, Vegas, they're going to sell out on the run and force Shedeur Sanders, if he gets the start, if Gabriel don't pass concussion protocol, or Gabriel, if he does clear and play in this one. Either way, they're going to stop Judkins and try to force one of those rookie quarterbacks to beat him. 22, Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. So Stevenson's been out over the last couple weeks, and Trevion Henderson took the ball and legitimately ran with it all the way for 5 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. But I still think this coaching staff likes Stevenson over there in New England. We know he's a good back in the goal line. even though he's had his fumble issues this season. But I think this could be a 50-50 split, and it's a slam dunk matchup at the Bengals that can't stop anyone. 23, Aaron Jones of the Minnesota Vikings. Aaron Jones, he's really taken a lot of the work now over the last few weeks since he's been back from his injury with Jordan Mason. He didn't do much, unfortunately, for Mason's cause when Jones was out of the lineup to distance himself in this backfield. So Aaron Jones, a veteran, could do it all out of the backfield. He's a 3-down back, pass protect, in between tackles, catch the football. And this week, the juices are flowing a little extra at the Green Bay Packers, a team that cut him last year in the offseason to sign Josh Jacobs. 24, Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. Walker finally had a breakout game last week where he had a best game of the season for him. So Kenneth Walker, I know he's a talented running back. He did get a goal line touch where Charbonnet, that's usually his role in the offense, and he found the end zone. And this week, it's a pretty good matchup at the Tennessee Titans. 25, David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. So this week, a great matchup versus the Giants. Their run defense really can't stop anyone. We saw last week Jacobs early in that game and Emmanuel Wilson in that second half of the game have a good ball game. In New York all season long, they got names on defense, but they just can't stop anyone where teams are putting up a decent amount of points. So this week I could see it where Detroit's off to an early lead, and second half of the game, Montgomery comes in as the bruiser and runs out the clock in that one. 26, Zach Charbonnet of the Seattle Seahawks. So Zach Charbonnet, it's been a decent season for him. Him and Walker in a 50-50 split. He's the goal line back as Charbonnet. Last week I know he did get vultured out of that role where Walker was in there on a 2-minute drill and scored that touchdown. And that's the only reason he got the goal line touch. But like I said, Charbonnet's a physical back. And also if they're up early and often in second half, he's the grinder to run out the clock. Charbonnet could get in some good fantasy points. 27, Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. So Atlanta coming in, not a good defense this season. But the thing is with Kamara, he's not catching the football much out of the backfield, where throughout his career he's been one of the best PPR running backs in all fantasy football. And this week, like I said, versus Atlanta, even though it's a decent matchup, the ceiling just isn't that high for Alvin Kamara. 28, Kareem Hunt of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Kareem Hunt, I think he's the man over there now in the backfield once again. Pacheco hasn't looked good all season long. He's missed the last few games with a knee sprain, is Isaiah Pacheco. And I think Kareem Hunt this week, he's going to be the bell cow in that backfield. And even if Pacheco did return to the lineup, Kareem Hunt already has that goal line work locked in. And we've seen him score a decent amount of touchdowns inside the fives this season. 29, Tyrone Tracy of the New York Giants. Another 50-50 split backfield where Cam Scatterbo destroyed his ankle a few weeks ago versus the Green Bay Packers. And Tracy and Singletary has been the committee in the backfield, obviously, here for this Giant team. So this week in the matchup at the Detroit Lions, where they're going to be trailing early and often, and then it obviously goes into Tracy's favor, where he's a better receiving back than Singletary. I think he could be maybe a flex option in deeper leagues. 30, Bam Knight of the Arizona Cardinals. So I'm not having much hope that Trey Benson will return to the lineup. The original timetable was 4 to 6 weeks, but this Cardinal team, we know they're done. I don't think they want to rush Trey Benson back. And Bam Knight's been a serviceable running back. Last week, once again, 14.5 fantasy points. But the only thing with Bam Knight, he's a touchdown-dependent running back. But DeMarcado, he's not going to play in this game with the ankle injury. And it's down to Bam Knight and Michael Carter in this one. 31, Kenneth Gainwell of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So like I said, I think Warren's going to play. He's going to practice limited to begin the week. And he also could have went back in that ball game and played. But Kenneth Gainwell, one of the better handcuff backs and backup backs in the league he's been this season, where throughout his career he really hasn't been that great, but he's gotten better in the receiving game as Kenneth Gainwell. Always been decent physicality in between the tackles. And this week at Chicago, especially if Rodgers isn't going to play, this is going to be a run-heavy attack with both backs, I believe. 32, Tyjae Spears of the Tennessee Titans. So Tyjae Spears, for PPR leagues, he's been a solid running back to get you 8-10 fantasy points. And once again, the game script's going to go where they're trailing early and often and have to chase points. And that's where Spears comes in. And versus Seattle, that's just what I expect to happen in this ball game. So Spears, if you need 8-10 points, and like I said, with a lot of injuries and 4 teams on bye, he could be an all-right flex option. 33, Devin Singletary of the New York Giants. So last week it was a good game for Singletary. He found the end zone twice. He's more of the bruising back and goal line back, short yardage. But this week at Detroit, it could be a game where they're down early, and obviously they're not going to run the football a whole lot, and that's where Tracy comes in, and that's why I like Tracy higher on the list than Singletary this week. 34, Tony Pollard of the Tennessee Titans. So Tony Pollard, he doesn't have a high upside. Is Tony Pollard, unfortunately. You don't catch the football out of the backfield anymore, where that's Tajay Spears' role in this offense. And pretty much he's been a touchdown-dependent back this season. And if you don't get that, it's Pollard. His numbers haven't been there. 35, Kyle Monangai of the Chicago Bears. So Monangai, he's a bruising running back. We saw him a few weeks ago start at the Cincinnati Bengals, have a monster game. But DeAndre Swift's the starter. I know Monangai had a touchdown last week in that ball game at the goal line for the Chicago Bears. But besides that, he didn't get many touches or many looks in that game. So he's nothing more than a back. And the running back this week with the Steelers coming in, and the 36th and final running back is Jordan Mason of the Minnesota Vikings. Mason's taking a back seat in this backfield. Taron Jones over the last few weeks since Jones came off IR for this Minnesota Viking team. But Mason did find the end zone last week in that ball game versus the Chicago Bears. But this week, a tougher matchup at Green Bay. And also, it's a game they're most likely to be chasing points. And that's where we know Aaron Jones is the receiving back as well in this offense. So that's a top 36 running backs I'm ranking for Week 12 of the fantasy football season.